Eleanor Bron plays the title role in Tales the Countess Told, and then real-life drama in Damascus with The Pianist of Yarmouk at 7:30. Stephen Wyatt has been writing for stage, screen and radio for half a century, from his first full-length comedy at the Edinburgh Fringe exactly 50 years ago this month, to dozens of theatre plays, even more radio plays, some Doctor Who episodes, and more recently a bittersweet comedy starring Dame Penelope Keith that toured last year. He also wrote this for Radio 4 back in 2001, which now gets its first outing here on 4 Extra this weekend. This is Tales the Countess Told.
Now the king was exceedingly angry and looked everywhere for someone to blame. And of course he thought of the countess. The countess, he said, could never be trusted. But the countess had become older and wiser. Instead of waiting for a summons to explain herself to the angry king, she decided to pack her bags and seek solace in the sleepy realms of Arcadia.
Tales the Countess Told by Stephen Wyatt with Eleanor Bron, Janine Wood and Adam Godley.
Meh! Oh, do be quiet, you courtiers! Dear Eloise, do you remember that time when we all discussed the merits of the country life, its tranquility, its honesty, its closeness to nature? I remember waxing quite eloquent on the subject of my own dear Barnville, where I was born and brought up. Now I know the truth. A few days here in Barnville is a delight, an idyll. A few months in Barnville is a form of torture.
Is it possible to go any faster?
Lady?
Is it possible to go any faster?
No, my lady. Sorry, my lady.
What's happening? Pierre? Pierre!
It's the wheel, my lady. We're stuck.
I try to travel, but my carriage breaks down. I try to write stories, but somehow the fount of inspiration has dwindled to a muddy puddle. If I had a wish, it would be for someone to talk to, a companion, a kindred spirit. I remember you telling me that I was like a witch. If I set my mind to wishing for something, I was always sure to get it in the end. But I reminded you that I also write fairy stories, and in fairy stories being granted a wish is often fraught with complications. Come in.
My lady, a young gentlewoman is asking to see you. She says she is your neighbour.
Her name?
Madame de Ventadour.
And she arrived just now, out of the blue?
Yes, my lady. She said she hoped she might be forgiven for the unexpected intrusion.
Ah, thanked, more like.
Shall I admit her?
Of course, why ever not?
I feel quite embarrassed at my boldness. And I have to confess, since we are neighbours, I have often wanted to make your acquaintance.
You're lonely.
Yes. I suppose I am.
And your husband?
He is often away. He likes to hunt.
Deer? Boar? Other women?
I would not think ill of my husband.
No, of course not. Forgive me. I have become a very inquisitive old woman.
Hardly old, madame.
Old enough to be your mother?
My mother is not old, madame.
A good answer. Well done. My dear Madame Louise, you said?
Yes, madame.
My dear Louise, I have to ask you, do you know who I am?
You are my neighbour, madame, and a lady of quality I feel confident I am privileged to visit.
So your husband has said nothing?
Forgive me, I don't understand.
I am Marie-Catherine Le Jumelle de Barneville, Countess d'Aulnoy. The name means nothing to you?
No, madame.
How old are you, my dear?
18.
And your husband?
He is 45, madame.
A father figure?
He is my husband.
Just so. And you were married?
When I was 17.
Ah, I was married at 16.
But madame, 17 is only...
I know. But by your age, I was in the Bastille on trial for conspiracy to murder my husband.
Madame...
What?
I'm sure you were wrongfully accused.
Oh, alas, no. I did everything I could to see him dead. Unfortunately, I failed.
Madame,
You ought to go. Is that what you mean?
I don't wish to appear impolite, but...
You see why I asked about your husband. He is of an age to remember the Countess d'Aulnoy and thoroughly disapprove.
Madame, I am a guest in your house, and I'm sure that whatever happened, you had good reasons for what you did.
My dear, I think I shall like you after all. But I don't want you to fall out with your husband on my account.
My husband is a man of great soul.
Then you are a remarkably fortunate young bride.
Yes, I think I am.
But there is something else I should warn you about.
Surely not, madame.
I am beyond the pale in another way. I write fairy stories.
I don't understand.
I'm one of those dangerous women who hold salons in Paris and read the stories they have written out loud.
Well, of course, my nurse used to tell me fairy stories when I was young.
Your nurse told you country tales, without shape, without artistry. Mine are very different.
I used to love listening to her.
I'm not condemning you, my dear, or your nurse. I do not wish to boast, but the tales I tell are read out in the most fashionable salons in the whole of Paris. They are not nursery tales.
I am being stupid.
Louise, you are far from stupid. But I'm describing something you've not yet encountered.
Would you tell me one of your stories?
Of course. With the greatest of pleasure. If you're sure you want to listen.
I'd like to listen. Very much. I am not expected home for some hours, and if I hear your tale, I will perhaps learn more about you.
Perhaps.
Did you really plot to murder your husband?
Oh, yes. Is that what you want me to tell you about?
No, not at all. I'd much prefer the fairy story.
My dear, relax. Just listen and be patient. As you said yourself, you may learn something.
Does your story have a moral, then?
Nothing as straightforward as that, but instructive nevertheless. Well, are you ready?
Of course.
I call this the story of Princess Laidronette and the Green Serpent. Once upon a time, there was a great queen who gave birth to twins, both daughters, both beautiful. So she invited 12 fairies who lived nearby to the christening to bestow gifts upon them, as was the custom in those days.
Such beautiful little girls. Babies.
Unfortunately, the queen made a fatal miscalculation, as fairy tale rulers are inclined to do, unlike, of course, their real-life equivalents. She forgot to invite the fairy Magotine.
Fairy Magotine, delighted that you can make it. Please be good enough to take your seat at the table.
Your Majesty, if you had really wanted me to take a seat at your table, you would have sent me an invitation. But you only want fairies who are young and pretty. You didn't want Magotine because she is ugly and old.
Before she could be stopped, Magotine hurried to the cradle where the 2 baby princesses lay and picked up one of them.
Well, little girl, I'll make sure you never forget the fairy Magotine. I endow you with perfect ugliness.
No! No!
And as for her little sister...
But luckily, before she could curse the second baby, the other fairies rallied together and rushed towards her to stop her just in time. With a final cackle, Magotine vanished from sight.
There, my darling.
But as the horrified queen took the first infant in her arms, She watched her grow uglier and uglier by the minute.
She's becoming hideous. I can hardly bear to look at her. What is happening? My beautiful baby. She's hideous. She's hideous.
And so the babies grew into young women, and the Queen called her elder daughter Laidronette, and the younger Belote. These names suited them perfectly, for Laidronette, despite her boundless intelligence, was as ugly as sin, and getting uglier, while her sister's beauty increased daily.
Madame,
What is it, my dear?
why was the princess cursed with ugliness?
It was her fate.
So she wasn't being punished?
Not for anything she'd done, no.
And her sister, she became more and more beautiful without having done anything to deserve it.
That was her fate.
Isn't it all rather unfair?
Of course. But then, isn't life?
And the Queen, was she married?
Oh, yes, there was a king.
Then I'm surprised you didn't mention him. Was he...
My dear, if you keep on asking questions, I fear we'll never get to the end of the story. When the Princess Belote was 15, she was engaged to be married to the handsome son of a neighbouring king. The Princess Laidronette, who had been living in self-imposed seclusion for the last few years, turned up, to her mother's dismay.
Laidronette.
Mother?
We hadn't expected to see you. I'm afraid you've grown a great deal uglier since I last saw you.
I did so want to see my sister's wedding.
Well, of course you can see it, dear.
Oh, thank you, Mother.
I'm sure we can find some screen for you to stand behind, with a hole for you to peep through.
The Princess Laidronette watched the wedding from behind her screen, and then left the palace. She knew in her heart of hearts that she was so hideous that even her own mother was relieved to see the back of her. She walked deep into the forest. Although she tried not to be bitter, she felt the heart inside her shrivelling like a leaf in autumn.
Who's there?
Suddenly, she saw in front of her a long, long green serpent, its hideous length curled round the foot of a tree.
Don't hurt me, please!
Why should I hurt you?
You're a serpent and...
I'm horrible to look at.
Yes, but...
Laidronette, you're not the only unhappy creature. At birth I was even handsomer than you. Listen to me.
No!
But the princess was too frightened by its hissing and its ugly green coils to listen. She fled from the serpent in terror.
Madame?
Yes?
How did it come about that the serpent could speak?
You mean you've never met a snake which could talk?
No, Madame.
Then you've clearly never visited Versailles. As she stood catching her breath, the princess realized that she was standing on the seashore. And there, gliding towards her, was a small gilt bark with a sail made of gold brocade and a mast of cedar. When it landed on the shore, the princess stepped on board to inspect all its beautiful decorations. Without her noticing, the bark drifted out to sea again. Suddenly the wind rose, and the waves became high.
Magotine! Magotine! This is none of your tricks! If I do die, what does it matter to you or anyone?
Princess, I will save you.
And the green serpent came riding the billows.
Trust me, Princess. I will save you.
No!
Without me, you will drown.
I'd rather drown! I don't want to owe my life to you! You frighten me, you monster! Stop! What are you doing?
Taking you to safety.
Let go at once!
But, Princess...
Let go, I say!
If you knew me better, you'd fear me less.
And with those words, the serpent plunged beneath the surf. But Laidronette was by then safely on the shore. But her remarkable adventures were not yet over. Over the beach towards her came a procession of 100 pagans, small oriental figures with nodding heads, the tallest of them, who was clearly the chief, no more than a foot high.
All hail! All hail the princess!
I don't understand.
We are pagans.
subjects of the ruler of this land, and we have been commanded to do our utmost to serve you. I am the chief Paygod, at your service. Follow me, if you would be so gracious.
She was led to a pavilion of green and gold brocade beside a grotto.
Your bath is prepared, madam.
But there are 2 baths.
One is for you, the other for the king of the Paygod.
Your king? But where is he?
Madam, he is presently with the army, waging war against his enemies. You will see him as soon as he returns.
Your king? Is he married?
No, madam. Our king is so charming that he has yet to find anyone who would be worthy of him.
The Paygods dressed her in beautiful clothes and waited on her hand and foot. They brought her books to read, food to eat, and instruments to play. The days passed in revelry and dancing. But somehow, awake at night in her bed, Laidronette knew all this was not quite enough.
Oh, Princess.
A voice spoke softly in the darkness, as if answering her thoughts.
Who's there?
You wouldn't feel so empty if you were prepared to open your heart and fall in love.
Who is this? Are you one of the Paygods?
Oh, no.
Then, who are you?
I am the unhappy ruler of this realm.
The king? But why are you unhappy?
Because I adore you. I can't even speak to you without trembling.
Are you a king with eyes?
Oh, yes.
Then you must know that I'm the ugliest person in the world.
Oh, I have seen you, madame, and I know you are not what you think yourself to be. Whether it's for your person, your merit, or your misfortunes, I don't know, but I repeat, I adore you.
You cannot!
Only my feelings of respect and timidity oblige me to keep myself hidden.
Then I'm grateful to you for that. But how can I possibly ever love anyone? Or what's happened to me?
You will never know if you don't open your heart. But I'm upsetting you. Do you want me to go?
It's best if you do.
As you wish.
The voice fell silent, but Laidronette stayed awake all night, pondering what it had said. The next day she could not refrain from questioning the chief Paygod.
Your king, how would you describe him?
Very handsome, madam.
And young?
Young and handsome and very charming, madam.
And you often receive news of him from the wars?
Oh, yes, madam, every day.
But does he know that I'm living in his palace?
Of course, madam. He knows everything about you. Every hour a courier is sent off to him with news of you.
I see.
So she went to bed that night, and again the voice returned.
Are you still so afraid of love?
If you knew my history, then you know I have every reason to fear it.
I love you.
Then you must have very strange tastes.
Perhaps. But I have my reasons, and if you knew them, you would pity me.
Tell me what they are.
Alas, I cannot. I cannot.
And again the invisible lover faded away. But the voice returned night after night, and Laidronette soon found only her invisible lover had the power to please her. Tell me, Louise, have you ever sat in the dark listening to a man pouring out his heart to you?
I have only listened to my husband.
You're quite sure about that?
Madame, do you doubt me?
My dear, how could I? You'll just have to use your imagination to picture how compelling Laidronette found the voice of her invisible suitor. Particularly one night when she awoke to find tears falling on her person.
Is there really no hope for me?
How can I love you without knowing or seeing you?
Alas, why make conditions that thwart my desire to please you? The same wicked Magotine who treated you so badly has condemned me to suffer for 7 years.
Magotine has condemned you?
Yes, 5 years have already elapsed. There are 2 remaining. I cannot tell you how much it would relieve the bitterness of my suffering if I became your husband.
You really want me to marry you?
More than anything. You said you felt your life was empty.
Yes.
You said you never expected to know what it was to be loved.
Yes, but...
So will you agree?
Yes, I will.
Laidronette told herself she had been swayed by pity. But I believe love also played its part in her decision.
You make me the happiest of beings, Laidronette.
I am glad.
But there is one request I must make of you. It is extremely important both for you and for me. You must not attempt to look upon me until the full term of my penance has expired.
You expect me to wait for 2...
Listen. If you are imprudent and succumb to your curiosity, then I shall have to begin serving my sentence all over again. Worse, you will share in my suffering.
And if I agree to your request?
Then in time, you will find in me all that your heart desires, and you yourself will regain the marvelous beauty Magatine took from you at birth. Will you agree? For both our sakes.
Oh, yes, my love. Of course.
A ship manned by pay-gods and loaded with presents was sent with letters from Laidronette to her mother, imploring her to come and visit her daughter in her realm. And impelled by a mixture of motherly concern and plain curiosity, the Queen came.
My dear, I'm more than a little puzzled. How long is it now that I've been enjoying your magnificent hospitality?
7 days, Mother.
7 days. And yet I've still to set eyes on my future son-in-law.
I've told you, Mother, he's out hunting.
Oh, he's out hunting, is he? Well, yesterday he was ill, and the day before that he was out fishing, and the day before that he was with the army, and the day before that you claimed he was on a pilgrimage. What exactly is going on?
He's very shy.
Laidronette, my dear, listen to me. I must be frank and say I think it a little odd that the king should be interested in someone, however lovable in other ways, with such unfortunate looks. Is there something wrong with him too? You can tell your mother.
I don't know.
Whatever do you mean?
I've never seen him.
What?
I've never seen him, but there's a good reason for that. He has only 2 more years to spend in this state of penance, and at the end of that time, I shall not only be able to see him, but I shall also become beautiful again myself.
You poor deluded child.
I don't understand.
Don't you see? You're walking into a trap. There's only one reason why this husband of yours hides away. He's a hideous monster.
No!
Look at these servants of his. Little shriveled freaks. They're not natural. Like subjects, like ruler.
But he has such a gentle voice.
All the better to deceive you. If he's got nothing to hide, why is he hiding away?
But the curse...
You've only his word for all that nonsense. You're never going to feel safe with him until you've cleared up the matter once and for all.
Well, of course, Laidronette resisted her mother's advice as best she could. But we all know how powerful mothers can be. The thoughts her mother had brought to the surface wouldn't leave her. That night, the invisible king came to her.
Soon we will be married, Laidronette. How I long for that moment.
If only...
If only what?
Forgive me, but I have to.
And she shone a lamp on the bed where the king lay.
Is this my reward?
For of course, lying there on the bed was the hideous, writhing green serpent.
What have I done?
You have destroyed.
If I could only undo what I have done.
But you cannot. My curse still falls on both of you.
But, Madame...
What is it, my dear?
Surely this cannot be the end. Laidronette cannot be left to suffer in this way.
My dear, if you imagine this is the end, then you must have an even bleaker view of human existence than I do.
But how can she possibly...
Of course, in my story, love is redeemed. but only after a number of trials set by the fairy Magotine.
Take these spider's webs and make me a net strong enough to catch salmon with.
But the web's barely strong enough to catch flies.
Do as I say. Put this millstone round your neck. Climb to the top of that mountain that soars above the sky. There, gather enough 4-leaf clovers to fill a basket.
But the millstone is 10 times heavier than I am.
That's your problem. If you don't do as I order, then your precious green serpent will suffer. Put on these heavy iron shoes. I want you to go down into the underworld and demand the essence of long life from Queen Proserpine. I'm afraid of falling ill and perhaps dying.
Will you never tire of persecuting me?
If you want to save that serpent lover of yours, you'd better get going.
And did the Princess Ledronette perform these impossible tasks?
Oh, yes.
But how?
With the help of her love for the king and her fairy protectrice.
Who was she?
A good fairy who gave her help and good advice.
You haven't mentioned her before.
She wasn't needed in the story before. By her brave attitude, the princess made her own luck. And so in time, after all her terrible trials, the Princess Ledronette became both wise and beautiful.
Because she had opened her heart. And did these terrible things because she loved the green serpent.
Just so. You understand very well for a respectable married lady.
And the fairy Magotine?
In the end, even Magotine could not resist the power of love. And the serpent? Well, when the time of Ledronette's travails were over, and she had bravely and devotedly completed all her tasks, he turned into a most beautiful young man, just as he had promised. And the curse was lifted.
My lovely princess.
My handsome king.
Your love has redeemed me.
Your love has made me beautiful.
Embrace me, my love.
Thus ends the tale of the green serpent.
Madame, forgive me.
Didn't you like my tale?
Oh, yes. But you have a reason for selecting this particular story.
Is that how it seems to you?
I don't know.
The story undoubtedly demonstrates the power of love.
Yes, but...
But what?
There's more. The princess could not bear not to know. She insisted on knowing what the prince was really like, even though it nearly destroyed her.
You mean her curiosity was almost fatal?
Yes, in a way, but...
But it was also very natural.
Yes. In the circumstances, I think I would be tempted to act like her.
You'd want to throw light into corners where light is best not shed.
I suppose that is what I mean. Yes.
Best to know if your husband really is a monster, you mean?
Madame, I see I was right. You were seeking to trap me.
Trap you? Whatever do you mean?
You want me to tell you the truth about my husband.
My dear, you told me how happy you are with him.
You know I wasn't telling the truth.
My dear, I know no such thing. Is he so very monstrous?
Yes.
And he can't be changed, however much you try to love him?
He cares only for the money I brought with me.
And your loving parents gave you a choice between this rich marriage and the convent?
Yes.
Does he hit you?
No. Mostly, he is indifferent to me. But he criticizes me for my stupidity and lack of beauty. He boasts to me of the whores he visits when he is in Paris and of the bed tricks they perform for him. I have tried to make him love me, but he just laughs at me. Sometimes I am so upset that
My dear, every young woman wishes her husband dead at some point or other. It's perfectly normal.
But I don't wish him dead.
Don't you? There's still time to tell you how close I came to getting my husband executed.
No.
You see, after 2 years of hateful marriage, I was sickened by his meanness. His joyless love-making, his brutality, his chasing after page boys, his stupidity, his snobbery. And I thought I would run mad if I wasn't free of him.
I don't want to hear.
I think you do. In despair, I went to my mother, a widow then, and living openly with her aristocratic lover. So we all put our heads together, along with my lover, of course.
No.
We devised a plot to kill my husband. You know the punishment for openly criticizing the king. The Count d'Aulnoy hated paying his taxes. He was congenitally mean and hopelessly disorganized, but that didn't stop him blaming the king for all his problems. If we could only get witnesses, then he would be accused of lèse-majesté and executed.
Oh, Madame, forgive me.
Why?
I must go. I'm not feeling well. In any case, I have already overstayed my welcome.
This is very sudden.
I should not have said what I said.
I shall not repeat it.
All the same, it's best if it was as if it had not been said.
You are my guest and may say what you like.
No, Madame, I may not. If you will excuse me. Goodbye, Madame. And thank you.
Please, call again.
Thank you, Madame. But it's best if I do not. Goodbye.
So much for wishes. Is that all you really have to say? Dear Eloise, the cows would doubtless tell me all the gossip regarding the ball if they could, but of course they cannot. Your news of the Marquise and her coachman is therefore more than welcome. But oh, how I miss our weekly salons. A few weeks ago, a young woman visited me here. She intrigued me, but I fear I have frightened her away for good, poor thing. And so my thoughts turn inevitably to the terrible events I have fled to save myself from. It is horrible to think that poor Angélique is condemned. I thought she had every chance of proving her innocence if I was not around, but everything seems to have conspired against her. A huge injustice is about to be committed. If only the king would... No, I must not. As you know, I cannot say more in case my letters are read, but my thoughts are much with her, particularly as I see the lambs here going to the slaughter. I would like to be able to save her, but it seems I no longer have the witch's powers you ascribe to me. No, I cannot say that either. Eloise, forgive me if I break off. I do believe guests have arrived. A visitor?
Yes, madame.
Madame de Ventadour?
Yes, madame.
Show her in.
I have been thinking about what you said.
I simply told you a story.
No. There was more in it than that. There was also a second story about your husband, and I would not let you finish it. I have no right to intrude upon painful episodes in your life, I know.
But you would like to hear the end?
Yes. If you're prepared to...
Oh, yes, I'm prepared. I discovered many years ago that a little pain drains out of something that hurt us each time we tell it over again. We should perhaps call this a tale on the vanity of human wishes. It took years for me to see how far it was my will, my need, that drove events on. At the end of it, there were 2 men tortured and executed, and neither of them my husband.
But I don't understand.
In this tale, everything went wrong, and the suffering is all too real. My husband turned the tables on us. Here were my mother's lover, the Marquis of Courvoisier, and my admirer, the Chevalier de Bonenfant, and a well-intentioned gentleman called Lamoisière, all prepared to swear Daunois had spoken treason to them. Here was Daunois, an unpopular man at the best of times, immediately arrested and thrown into prison. But he held his nerve. He asked, why would I speak treason aloud to two men I've never met before, to whom I'd only just been introduced by the Marquis of Courvoisier? It makes no sense. So the three men were called in and questioned together and individually, and they contradicted each other, and Lamoisière fell apart and confessed, and that was the end of it. Apart from the torture and execution, that is.
Did you truly love the Chevalier de Bonenfant, madame?
I can't really remember. And of course of his screaming and cursing under torture, I only heard.
Oh, madame.
What is it?
I feel so very sorry for you.
Don't be. It's over 30 years ago.
And your mother?
She fled to Spain. She's still there. I've visited her once or twice, but she's never really forgiven me. It was all done for my benefit, and yet it was the man she loved more than any other. A dignified, urbane, grey-haired companion who died in hideous pain, screaming obscenities.
But it was she who concocted the plan.
Oh, yes. I sometimes think that if I'd been older and more in charge, I would have planned it better. I know how to plan and tell stories, you see. Or maybe after that grim initiation, I forced myself to learn.
I can't imagine surviving something like that.
Neither could I at the time. I thought I would be executed too. But I played the innocent young ingenue well enough, and they put me into a convent. Quite a fashionable convent. The sisters saw more cavaliers than most women who live at large. In the end, I was allowed to leave the country.
Where did you go?
Spain, England, Italy. I paid my way by the information I picked up and sent back to the French government. I was rather an accomplished spy, so eventually I was rewarded for my services by being allowed to return. But enough of me. How are your own plans?
Madame?
For murdering your husband, I mean.
Madame, I have no such intention.
But I am right in assuming that you do want him dead.
I do not want him dead. Oh, please.
Wish him not alive and not your husband.
Madame, I see I cannot deceive you. My father made me marry him. He came to visit us with his bad breath and his lecherous eye and his horrible laugh, and I never imagined my father would insist.
And your mother?
She insisted too.
You know something, my dear? I've seen it in your eyes.
Seen what, madame?
You are in love with someone. Someone else, I mean.
Madame!
You're blushing.
I don't know what you mean, madame.
Well, he's certainly not your husband, that's for sure.
Madame.
Yes?
I would very much like to hear another fairy story.
You want to change the subject?
I'd like to hear another tale.
That's not necessarily the same thing. But I am delighted to oblige you, my dear. The tale of the Yellow Dwarf and the King of the Golden Mines. Once upon a time, there was a queen.
Come to me, Toot-Belle. But I'm still enjoying the dancing, Mamma.
Now the queen was a widow, and she had only one daughter.
You will tire yourself, my dear. But, Mother, you know how much I enjoy dancing. You've danced enough. But so many wish to dance with me. I cannot disappoint them.
Oh, very well.
Thank you, Mamma.
Nothing was as dear to the queen as her daughter, and she was so afraid of losing her affection that she never corrected any of her faults. And as if all this weren't enough, the queen capped her daughter's vanity by naming her Toot-Belle. 20 neighbouring kings vied to marry her.
Mercy, fair princess.
I long to be with you.
I worship the very ground you tread on.
Oh, princess.
Unfortunately, a man might have hanged himself 5 or 6 times a day to please her, and the Princess Toot-Belle would have thought it but a trifle. The kings complained to the Queen.
We cannot endure this waiting.
She keeps us all on tenterhooks.
She must choose one of us to end this agony.
Help us, please.
Help us, please. Help us, please.
The Queen finally regretted her indulgence and decided something must be done. But what?
Madame,
Yes, my dear?
is this a reproach to me?
Whatever do you mean?
I obeyed my parents and married. The princess disobeyed.
My dear, the tale is only just begun.
Oh, heat. This terrible heat.
The Queen, in despair, decided that her only hope was to consult a famous fairy called the Fairy of the Desert, who was believed to be an expert in such matters.
I'm going to faint.
Unfortunately, the Desert Fairy lived in the desert, and so the Queen's visit to see her was arduous and dangerous. And the heat wasn't the worst of it.
Alas, what will become of me?
To her dismay, the Queen found her way blocked by a slavering pride of lions.
They're going to devour me. What can I do?
Excuse me, Your Majesty.
The Queen looked all around her,
Up here, Your Majesty.
and the Queen looked up into a tree just above her. And there, sitting in the tree, was a little man, no more than a foot tall, eating oranges.
I see you're afraid, Your Majesty.
I fear the lions will eat me.
More than likely. They've eaten plenty of others before you.
Then I must prepare to die. And it's all my daughter's fault.
You have a daughter?
Yes.
That's interesting. I've been looking for a wife for some time.
Oh, yes, but...
Please yourself. If you promise me your daughter in marriage, I'll save you from the lion.
Now perhaps I should mention that the dwarf was not only very short, but also very ugly and very, very yellow all over. On the other hand, the lions had 2 heads each and 4 rows of terrifyingly sharp teeth.
Well?
My Lord Dwarf, Tootwell is yours.
I'm not sure I want her.
But she is the loveliest princess in the world.
Oh, very well then. I'll accept her as my wife out of charity. But don't forget what you promised me.
No. Save me. Where am I?
You're here in the palace, Mamma. You've been in a fever for days.
Tootwell.
Yes, Mamma?
I'm still a little confused, but I want you to promise me something.
Oh, of course, Mamma.
None of your tricks now.
Oh, Mamma, I'm so pleased to see you better. Of course I promise.
Then, please, get married as soon as possible.
Get married? But whom shall I choose?
Whoever you like most. You have my blessing. But please, get married.
I promise.
Do you know which king you will choose?
Oh, yes.
So, which king is it?
The king of the golden mines. He is the handsomest of the kings by far. He's also very, very rich.
Could you not have chosen him before?
But, Mamma, I have a devotion of 20 kings. Why should I rush to choose one of them?
Why, indeed.
And so the Princess Tootwell agreed to marry the King of the Golden Mines. But as the King and the Princess stood at the altar, something very strange happened. Down the nave of the church came 2 large turkey cocks, drawing a very clumsily made box. And behind came an old crone, whose great age and decrepitude were as striking as her ugliness.
Stop! Stop at once! Do you know who I am? I'm the Desert Fairy.
Greetings, Desert Fairy. We welcome you.
Do you think you can break your promises to my friend, the Yellow Dwarf, with impunity? If it hadn't been for him, you would have been devoured by lions.
Well, I appreciate that.
We do not put up with such insults in Fairyland. Your daughter is promised to the dwarf.
But actually,
what is she saying?
But it was the King of the Golden Mines who took action. He advanced towards the Desert Fairy, sword in hand.
Enough, old woman.
I'm only telling the truth.
I said enough. Leave this place forever or else.
Unfortunately, no sooner had he said these words than the lid of the box drawn by turkeys burst open, and out of it came the yellow dwarf, mounted on a huge tomcat.
Not so fast, young man.
Out of my way.
Don't think you can assault this illustrious fairy. You're going to have to deal with me first.
Who are you?
I'm your foe. No, worse, I'm your rival. The Princess Toothbelly promised to me.
Miserable midget. You have the audacity to declare yourself the lover of this divine princess.
I do, as a matter of fact.
How dare you? I would long since have eliminated you if you had really been worthy of dying by my hand.
Is that so?
The dwarf stuck his spurs into the side of his cat. Everyone drew back in terror. Only the king held fast.
How about you, dwarf? How about you?
The sun suddenly became as red as blood, and it grew so dark they could scarcely see each other. Undaunted, the king continued to press the yellow dwarf. But then the desert fairy rushed towards the princess and stabbed her. Seeing the princess bathed in her own blood, the king rushed to rescue her, but the dwarf was quicker. Leaping back onto his tomcat, he snatched the princess from the arms of the queen and disappeared with his prize. The king stood in despair. Then he felt his eyesight failing him, as an irresistible power carried him off into the air. What misfortunes! Love, cruel love! Is this how you treat two young lovers who acknowledge you as their lord?
Just when each of them had found an ideal partner. It seems so sad.
Don't forget that she was promised to the yellow dwarf.
That was her mother's doing.
My dear, you are in love with someone else, aren't you?
I just hope your story has a happy ending for the young lovers.
My dear Louise, I've told you one story with a happy ending. How many more can you reasonably expect?
Oh, where am I? Where is Tootbell?
The king awoke with his eyesight restored. Unfortunately, he also found himself chained to a rock in a gloomy cave.
Help me, somebody! Can anyone hear me?
The fact is that the desert fairy had no sooner set eyes upon the king of the golden mines than she had become infatuated with him.
I hear you, handsome prince. Why are you chained here?
What the king saw now was a lovely nymph, because the desert fairy had made use of her magic powers to acquire the graces and charms denied her by nature.
Alas, fair nymph, I don't know why I have been brought here by that cursed desert fairy.
She wants to marry you, and she's very determined when she sets her mind on something.
Alas!
But if you trust me, I can help you.
Thank you, fair nymph.
Fortunately, at this moment, the king happened to register the beautiful nymph's feet, which resembled those of a griffin. It was the one part of her anatomy the desert fairy could not change with even her most powerful magic. At once the king was on his guard, but did his best to appear to play along.
Ah, fair nymph, it's true that I loved a beautiful princess, but if the desert fairy restored my liberty to me, I feel sure that gratitude would lead me to love no one but her.
Do you really mean that?
Of course. I'm not experienced in the art of deception. Wouldn't any man's vanity be flattered if he was wooed by a powerful fairy instead of a mere princess? But of course, it's difficult to feel anything except hatred when I'm chained like this.
Things would change if you weren't chained.
Can you doubt it?
Very soon after, the desert fairy resolved to transport the king to a spot as beautiful as the cave he now inhabited was horrible. Meanwhile, the Princess Tootbell languished inside a castle made entirely of steel.
Princess!
I will not listen.
You've not allowed me to say anything yet.
You killed my love. I will not marry you.
Says who? Don't forget your mother promised you to me.
Am I bound by my mother's promises?
Frankly, yes. Or would you have preferred to see your mother eaten by lions?
Of course not. But I don't love you.
You can learn.
Never.
Oh, it'll take less time than that.
Unfortunately, at this point, the princess looked up to heaven and saw the king passing through the ether with the desert fairy. Except that to the princess, she looked like a beautiful nymph. She was too far away to see the griffin feet.
Alas, is there no end to my suffering?
There's always an end if you'll agree to marry me.
Never.
Even after this, never!
The king, unfortunately, was able to look down and see his beloved bathed in tears and circled in steel. He now had to work out the best way to string along the desert fairy and effect Tootbell's rescue. Even the most innocent of lovers can become devious in a good cause.
Did you by any chance look down just now and see the Princess Tootbell?
You know I did.
Did it upset you?
Of course it aroused feelings in me. But you are the desert fairy and infinitely her superior in mind.
You know I am the desert fairy.
Of course. Who could fail to perceive your innate loveliness through this disguise?
Have I really inspired you with sentiments so favourable?
You know you have. All I ask is a token of your goodwill towards me.
And what token is that?
I hope you will not refuse me when I ask you to protect Tootbell.
Reflect on what you ask of me.
I know I ask a great deal.
You ask too much. The Yellow Dwarf is my best friend. Do you want me to use my skills against him in order to release a woman I still regard as my rival?
How can I prove I love you?
That's a very good question.
I only need time.
Time?
To make myself worthy of you.
In what way?
My appearance, after all these adventures, is not what it might be.
You need fresh clothes?
Yes.
A scented bath?
Oh, yes.
And so the desert fairy allowed the handsome king to put on fine clothes and perfume his body, and altogether make himself even more handsome for her delectation.
Am I more acceptable to my desert fairy's eyes?
Very acceptable indeed. You are a very beautiful young man.
The desert fairy became so infatuated with the king that she accorded him liberties that her more cautious self would never have allowed. Older women sometimes have these feelings for lovely young men. So, of course, do young women now and then.
Oh, madame.
The result of the king's flattery was that he obtained permission from the desert fairy to walk daily by the seaside.
Oh, Tootbell, my Tootbell, how I miss you. Can you hear me, spirit of the ocean? If it's true that you protect lovers, then rise now from your coral caves and help a despairing lover.
Suddenly, out of the water rose a beautiful mermaid.
I have heard of your sad predicament. If you trust me, I can rescue you.
I trust you completely. I am at my wit's end and you give me hope out of nowhere.
I have seen your unhappy princess daily, and her beauty and merit have aroused my compassion.
Please, take me to her.
I will do as you ask. But there is something you must know.
What is that?
The princess saw you floating through the ether with the desert fairy. Except she did not know it was the desert fairy. She thought it was a beautiful nymph.
So she believes I love someone else.
Consult your own heart.
What do you mean?
I am sure you will be able to persuade her of your fidelity. But we are approaching the castle of steel. Here is a sword fashioned from a single diamond. You will need it to defend yourself against your foes. It will help you brave the greatest dangers.
Thank you, mermaid, thank you.
But one word of warning. You must never, ever let this sword drop from your hand. If you do, you will be in grave danger. Adieu.
Adieu.
Guided by his love, the king of the golden mines advanced into the steel castle. 4 terrible sphinxes surrounded him, but he flashed his sword at them, and they fell powerless before his feet. But then a greater and more confusing challenge presented itself. 24 graceful nymphs advanced towards him. Naturally chivalrous, the king hesitated to attack them.
Strike! Strike! Or your princess is lost forever!
The king, spurred on by these words, rushed at the nymphs, and they scattered, screaming. His way was free, and he was face to face with Tootbell. But she looked at him with reproach in her eyes.
Ah, King, you said you loved me.
That is why I am here.
But I saw you sailing through the air with a lady of extraordinary beauty.
Please, princess, do not doubt me. It is only you I love. I've come to release you from the Yellow Dwarf, don't reject the aid of the most faithful of lovers, please.
Unfortunately, in pleading his cause, the king let the magic sword drop from his hand, and the yellow dwarf, who had been hiding all this while beneath the leaves of a lettuce, no sooner saw it fall from the king's grasp than he sprang forward, dagger in hand.
Good day to your majesty.
Don't harm him, please!
Don't harm him when he is in my power and wanted to steal you from me, princess.
Spare him, please!
I am unarmed.
Very foolish of you in the circumstances, particularly when you've been given a powerful magic sword.
I still defy you.
Do you? Well, I'll give you a choice. I'll spare your life so long as you let me marry the princess.
Never.
You're sure about that?
I'd rather die.
Don't say that!
I'd rather die than let you marry this monster.
Dwarf, listen. Rather than let him die, I agree to marry you.
You'll marry me?
Yes.
I'd rather die than see you married to him.
Well, that's easily arranged.
Without further ado, the dwarf stabbed the king to the heart and laid him dead at his feet. The princess watched her lover die in horror.
My love! Oh, my love!
Unable to bear life without her lover, the princess fell on his body, and her spirit quickly fled to join his. The wicked dwarf much preferred to see the princess dead than in the arms of his rival. The desert fairy, when she learned what had happened, felt very much the same. Only the friendly mermaid regretted the death of the lovers. But all the favour she could gain from fate was to turn them into palm trees. Their bodies, so perfect in life, became two lovely trees, and their branches joined in the embraces they had been denied in life. So ends the tale of the Yellow Dwarf.
Oh, madame, it is such a sad tale.
I told you that you couldn't always expect a happy ending.
But perhaps if she'd married the dwarf, all might have been well.
If you want a husband who is yellow and 1 foot tall.
Then you think she should have married the handsome prince?
If she'd made up her mind in the first place. But of course she didn't.
She was young. She didn't fully understand what love means. The punishment seems very harsh.
Punishments often are.
And the Yellow Dwarf was left alive?
Just like my husband.
And mine. Oh, madame, if only I knew what to do. You are so very wise.
I am just a storyteller.
I have made a vow to love, honour and obey.
You can't make a vow to love anyone.
Just so. And you can't make a vow not to love anyone either.
Is he young, this admirer?
I cannot tell you.
What would he do for you? Would he suffer like the king of the golden mine?
I would not ask that of him, madame.
When I was in Spain, I saw the oddest sight. You know that men of a religious disposition are given during Holy Week to whipping themselves furiously as they process down the streets. Flagellants, they're called. When these flagellants meet a handsome woman, they promptly whip themselves at such a rate that the blood flies all over her. This is considered a particular civility, and the lady acknowledges and thanks them for it.
Today you seem determined to tell me horrible things.
Perhaps that is because one of my best friends is under sentence of death.
Oh, madame, forgive me.
I'm glad that you came. Otherwise I would be alone with my thoughts.
But now I should go.
Perhaps you should. I should warn you of something before you go.
Madame?
The friend I mentioned. She is accused of conspiring to murder her husband, Tique, an eminent politician. Some ruffian took a pot shot at him and, when arrested, implicated Angélique. There's no other proof. And her husband survived the attack.
But she is under sentence of death.
Yes. Unless His Gracious Majesty chooses to pardon her.
I trust he will. I shall pray for her.
That is good of you, my dear. But I want you to remember, I am known for associating with plots to murder husbands.
I have no such plan. We have no such plan.
We?
His name is Philippe.
Your lover?
My admirer. We love each other. But not in the sense that we are lovers.
Be careful.
We are careful.
I mean, when you make your plans.
There are no plans.
That is a good answer. God bless you both. Be off now. Am I turning soft in my old age? Leave me in peace! Stop! Please! Please stop! I can scarcely put pen to paper, Eloise. All I can think of is her laughter, her vitality, her honesty. And now her head has been brutally separated from her shoulders. You tell me she was brave. Of course she was brave. That is no consolation. She assured me she had nothing to do with the planning of Robert's death. She would not lie to me, of all people, would she? I hate this society of ours, with its knowing, smug little circles, all subservient to an aging tyrant who screwed around in his youth and now professes piety. Angélique was an honest woman, one of the few. She should not have been executed. I cannot send this letter.
You wished to see me, madame?
Is the coach repaired?
As much as it can be, madame.
There were 3 daughters. One talked too much, one was very vain, and one... No, she wasn't vain. They're always vain. She was lazy. 3 daughters of a queen. No, it's always a queen. 3 daughters of a king. One who talked too much, one who was lazy. Oh. Are we stuck again?
Yes, I'm afraid so, my lady.
Then I shall descend. How much longer?
I'm doing my best, my lady.
Well, here comes somebody whose coach would not appear to have terminal woodworm.
Countess, may I be of assistance?
3 times. Always 3. You look well, my dear.
I have been visiting someone.
Were his attentions pleasing to you?
I was visiting an elderly lady of my acquaintance.
And your husband?
He is out hunting.
In this weather?
In any weather.
And Philippe?
What about him?
Is he out hunting too?
I'm really not sure. And what about your friend? May I inquire what has happened to her?
No, you may not. But you may hear my new story.
No one else has heard it?
It has not yet been heard in the salons.
Once upon a time, there was a queen.
No, a king with 3 daughters. One who talked too much, one who was bone idle, and one who was...
intelligent and resourceful?
Just so. The eldest princess, Idelfonsa, was so idle that she never wore anything except slippers. She found putting on shoes too exhausting. The second princess, Babilada, was very different. She never stopped talking from morning to night. The third sister, Finetta, was very different again. Surprisingly, given her excellent qualities, she was her father's favourite daughter. One day, it became necessary for the king to go off to fight a war.
Finetta, my dear.
Yes, Father?
You know I must be off to fight the pagans.
It is expected of kings like you, Father.
Just so, but I have been concerned about how your sisters will behave during my absence. So I have consulted an eminent fairy of my acquaintance on the subject.
Oh. So what has the fairy proposed, Father?
Well, it's quite a drastic solution, I'm afraid. You're all going to have to go and live in a high tower in a very secluded spot away from trouble.
That's her advice.
I'm afraid so. Because of your sisters. And while you're in that tower, no visitors are allowed.
No visitors, and we're locked in. How are we going to eat, Father?
Good question. There's going to be a pulley attached to one of the windows of the tower, and provisions are going to be sent up to you every day by trusted servants.
But I'm still concerned about my sisters. They're very lovable, but easily led astray.
Which is where the glass distaffs come in.
Father, you lose me. Which glass distaffs?
Each of you will be given a glass distaff prepared by this very eminent fairy. If by any chance any of you girls does something that damages her honour, then the relevant distaff will shatter into pieces. So, when I return, it will be clear how prudently you have, or have not, behaved.
What will you do if all our distaffs are shattered?
Let's not think about that. I trust you, Finetta, to make sure it doesn't happen.
I appreciate your trust, Father.
The princesses were duly locked up in the tower with their glass distaffs, and the king went off to war. Finetta had her books and her sewing, and kept herself occupied, but her two sisters were bored to distraction.
There's no one to help me. I'm supposed to do everything for myself. Oh, I'm exhausted.
I'm so bored. There's no one to gossip about. There's no one to gossip to. I feel as if I don't really exist.
Oh, princesses, lovely princesses. Do you need a loyal and energetic serving woman?
I certainly do.
Do you want to hear all the latest gossip?
I'm desperate for it. I'm going mad stuck in this tower. Lead me to the gossip at once.
Of course, this old lady standing outside the tower was not an old lady at all. This was Prince Richcraft in disguise. Now, Prince Richcraft was the elder son of the king of the neighbouring kingdom, and one of the most cunning individuals you were ever likely to meet. Ruthless and cynical, Richcraft saw the princesses in the tower as a challenge.
So you'd like me to come and work for you?
Of course, of course!
Oh, I need help. I'm exhausted.
Then lower the basket, and I'll come up and visit you.
For future reference, I should mention that Prince Richcraft had a younger brother called Belavoir, who was both handsome and sweet-natured. Neither of these qualities, of course, could be applied to the Prince Richcraft, and the three princesses had just handed him the perfect opportunity to express himself.
Thank you, my dears.
So, what's the news?
Can you fetch me my gloves?
Oh, I can do more than that, lovely princesses.
With a flourish, Richcraft threw off his disguise and revealed himself in his own elegant apparel. Babilada, who was very nimble, took off in alarm to find Finetta. But Idlefonza, of course, had no energy and remained to hear Prince Richcraft out.
Oh, princess, lovely princess.
Who are you?
The Prince Richcraft, who burns only with love for you.
This is awfully sudden.
Not at all. I've heard of your beauty, but only now have I had the opportunity to see it for myself, and I am entranced.
Are you?
You know I am.
Do I?
Oh, yes. I want you to marry me.
But I...
You don't have the strength to say no, do you?
Well, as a matter of fact, I don't.
So say you'll be mine, lovely Idlefonza.
Oh, very well. I'll be yours.
My darling.
And with that kiss, the first glass distaff broke into 1,000 pieces. Encouraged by his success, Richcraft locked Idlefonza in her room and went in search of the others. But it wasn't hard to locate Babilada, who, in the absence of anyone else to talk to, was talking to herself.
Princess? Excuse me? Princess?
Who's there?
The Prince Richcraft.
The Prince Richcraft? I can't possibly let you in here.
You'd like to talk?
I'm going crazy in here with no one to talk to.
Then you must hear me. I am here for only one purpose. I am here to offer you my heart and hand.
How terribly exciting. I've never had a proposal of marriage before because I'm the middle sister and of course I have a sponsorship in that.
But it is you I love. You're so vivacious, so entertaining, so lovely. If only I could talk to you face to face, I could persuade you.
I can't.
Don't you trust me, my beauteous, desirable Babylada?
I can't.
Then I shall have to leave you. The pain is too much.
But you can't go now. There's so many things I have to tell you. There's so many things I have to ask you.
Goodbye!
Come back!
Of course, it did not take long for Prince Richcraft to convince the vapid Babylada of his sincerity. She was only too glad to tell him all about the glass distaffs, which simply increased his apparent ardour.
Princess, please agree to be mine.
But, Prince, you know I'd love to marry you, but I've experienced...
Hush, my lovely prattler. You don't want your elder sister to get me, do you?
Well, of course not.
Then you will be mine?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Which, of course, only left Finetta with her glass distaff, as it were, intact. Richcraft quickly went in search of her room, but the princess resolutely refused to open to him.
Princess! Princess! Let me in!
Never!
Trust me!
Never!
Pity me!
Never!
Eventually, the prince lost patience and broke open the door with a large wooden lock.
So, Princess, at last we are face to face.
Advance one step nearer, Prince, and I'll split your skull open with this hammer.
But, lovely Princess...
I mean it!
And indeed, the princess looked very determined, and her hammer very formidable. Richcraft decided on a quick change of tactics.
I am flattered, Princess. I did not think the love I feel for you could inspire you with so much hatred.
Where are my sisters?
What do your sisters matter? It's you I care for.
I need to see that they are all right.
Then agree to be mine.
I cannot.
You don't know how lovely you look there. I cannot let you by unless you consent to be mine.
Finetta eventually realized that she was in an impasse. She could force Richcraft to keep his distance, but she could not force him out of the way. So she hit on a plan.
If I agree to marry you, you will let me seek my sisters?
I give you my word of honor.
Finetta had a pretty shrewd idea what that was worth, but persisted nonetheless.
Then, handsome prince, I will gladly consent to marry you. There is one condition. It is night time now, and I believe that marriages made at night always turn out to be unhappy. Would you be prepared to postpone the ceremony until tomorrow morning?
Is this necessary?
It is to me. First, I must find my sisters and make sure they are not harmed.
But
I promise to mention none of this to them. And then, after I have said my prayers, I promise to show you a very comfortable bed where you may spend the night.
And tomorrow morning?
I will be waiting for you in my bedroom. Is it a bargain?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Despite his calculations, Prince Richcraft found Finetta extremely attractive, which may help to account for his agreement. So perhaps did the hammer, which she wafted daintily like a fan. The agreement made, Finetta went and found her sisters.
I didn't mean to promise, Vanessa, really, I didn't.
What's done cannot be mended. What rests to be done is another matter.
Finetta then rushed to one of the rooms in the tower. It looked like the others, but at its centre was a large hole through which all the rubbish and slops in the tower were disposed of down a very long tunnel. Quickly, Finetta put a couple of thin twigs across the hole, and then made a clean bed on top of them. A few minutes later, she showed Prince Richcraft into the room.
Here is your bed, Prince.
Thank you.
Sleep well.
Till tomorrow, then.
Till tomorrow.
The prince was so tired after all his efforts that he didn't bother to undress. Instead, he threw himself onto the bed. Richcraft was wounded both in his body and his self-esteem, and he ordered his father's servants to carry him home to plot revenge. Finetta, meanwhile, did all she could to restore her sister's morale, but both of them were plunged in gloom because of their broken distaffs.
I'm so tired.
I can hardly speak.
It was therefore with considerable delight that they saw boxes of fruit placed beneath the windows of the castle, accompanied by friendly fruit sellers.
Lemons.
Pears.
Apples.
Plums.
Without a thought of the consequences, they lowered the pulley and asked the fruit sellers to load the boxes into the basket so that they could pull it up. The boxes, of course, contained soldiers in the pay of Prince Richcraft. No sooner were they inside the tower than they searched for the Princess Finetta and dragged her away, despite the protests of her sisters.
Finetta! Finetta!
Well, Princess, you are now in my power, and I have every intention of repaying you for the trick you played on me. You will observe that we are at the top of a very, very high mountain.
Indeed.
You will also observe this barrel. It is lined inside with knives, razors, and jagged nails.
So I see.
I do not like to be humiliated. And you are going to pay for my humiliation.
I was defending my sisters and myself.
I don't care for your reasons. I'm going to punish you in the way you deserve. We're going to put you inside this barrel and roll you down this mountain.
Are you sure the barrel is strong enough?
Of course it's strong enough.
It was at this point that Prince Richcraft made his big mistake. To ensure the barrel was strong enough, he stooped to look inside it and inspect all its evil blades. With a swift movement, the princess pushed him into the barrel and then with a deft kick sent it hurtling down the very, very tall mountain. The wounds Prince Richcraft sustained were fatal. The people of his country were secretly relieved, as they were not looking forward to the reign of this treacherous and sadistic prince. Richcraft's younger brother, the sweet-natured and handsome Prince Bellevoir, was, however, desolate.
I'm dying.
No.
Oh, yes, I'm dying. Despite all your loving care. But you know who is responsible.
Yes, but...
There are no buts. Brother, since you love me, I want you to grant me my dying wish.
You know your wishes are sacred to me.
Then I shall die contented.
I'm glad.
Because I shall be revenged.
Brother, what do you mean?
Once I am dead, I want you to ask the Princess Finetta to marry you.
But, brother,
You are young and handsome. You'll have no difficulty in getting her to agree.
Brother, I cannot...
Oh, yes, you can. You have promised. And my dying wish is that you marry the Princess Finetta. And the moment she is yours, I want you to plunge a dagger into her heart.
Brother!
You promised me on my deathbed. Remember?
But, Richcraft, consider...
Remember? Oh.
No!
But it was too late. Richcraft was dead, and Bellevoir was bound by his oath. In the meantime, the king, the father of Finetta and her sisters, returned. He demanded to see the glass distaffs, and he saw 2 of them were broken. He knew all too well what that meant.
Father!
Father, listen to me, please.
Out of my sight!
Oh, Father, please don't upset
I
me.
never want to see you again.
Father, please listen. It wasn't their fault.
Yes, it was. Only you remained true.
The king was determined to punish his 2 elder daughters. He banished them to a parched desert land. Here, Ildefonsa soon died from heat and exhaustion, while Babilada wasted her gossip on the desert air before succumbing to misery and loneliness. Finetta was much distressed by the fate of her sisters, but while she was still grieving, she was informed that Prince Bellevoir had requested her hand in marriage.
But, Father!
I will not hear
He's
another...
the brother of Prince
It is a
Richard.
highly suitable match.
How can I marry the brother?
I have decided that you will marry him.
In those days, you see, the inclination of the partners was the last thing considered in arranging marriages. How times change. Some weeks later, the princess was married to an ambassador in the name of Prince Bellevoir, and then she was led over the border to meet her husband in his own country. As she had been directly responsible for the death of the heir to the throne, her qualms may be imagined. But when she saw Bellevoir, she was charmed.
Welcome, Finetta. Welcome, my bride.
The prince was also charmed by Finetta's beauty and intelligence. In fact, he fell in love with her there and then, as fireworks were set off to celebrate the nuptials.
Oh, Finetta.
Yes, my Bellevoir.
How happy I could be with you if...
If what?
If... Best not for you to know.
Finetta liked the prince enormously. Indeed, she fell in love with his beauty and sweet nature. But she was, despite everything, discreet, and everything she heard or noticed screamed caution. So before the nuptial night, she sent for her faithful lady-in-waiting.
Bring me straw.
Yes, Your Majesty.
And bring me a bladder.
Yes, Your Majesty.
And some sheep's blood.
Yes, Your Majesty.
And the entrails of some of the animals prepared for supper.
Will that be all, Your Highness?
Yes, I think so.
Left alone in the bridal chamber, Finetta made a figure out of the straw. Then she inserted into it the entrails and the bladder filled with blood. Then she dressed the figure she had created in her nightdress, put it in the bed, and left to rejoin the company. Some time later, the bride and groom were conducted to the chamber by the assembled company. The princess asked for a few moments to prepare herself. Everyone withdrew as the prince waited. The princess hid herself in a dark corner as Prince Bellevoir finally approached the figure in the bed.
Oh, Finetta, Finetta, this is not my wish. But I promised my brother on his deathbed. How much I have wanted to love and cherish you from the first moment I saw you. Even in my brother's account you showed courage and discretion. The last thing I wish to do is take out my sword and kill you, but I have no choice. Farewell, my love.
And the prince stabbed and stabbed into the supposed body of the princess and watched the blood pour from it.
Madame, there's somebody asking to speak to Madame de Ventadour.
Ladies, forgive me for bursting in like this.
Philippe, what is the matter?
Madame, I'm afraid there's been a terrible accident.
An accident? What do you mean?
Your husband, the Count, while out hunting...
He is not dead.
Madame, I'm sorry.
Oh, no!
Well, you know how to make an entry, monsieur.
Forgive me, Madame,
Spare your apologies. We must attend to Madame de Ventadour. Try and rest, my dear Louise, and don't move until you feel ready.
Thank you.
Monsieur Philippe, if I might have a word.
Of course, Madame.
So, how long have you been in the service of Madame de Ventadour?
I am in the service of Monsieur, her husband, Madame.
You were in his service. How long?
3 years.
And he was a good master?
We are all devoted to him. This terrible accident is a great shock to us all.
The stirrups were not properly secured, you said.
Monsieur was an excellent rider. There's no other explanation for how he could have fallen as he did.
Who is responsible for checking the stirrups?
A well-trusted groom who has served Monsieur for a number of years.
So nobody else could have tampered with them?
But, Madame, why would anybody want to do that?
I've no idea. Did anybody else have access?
The Count was adamant that nobody else came near. It can only have been that he readjusted them himself incorrectly.
And there's no doubt his neck is broken.
The best medical help had been summoned before I came here to find Madame. But it was useless. This is terrible news to bring to Madame, I know. They were a devoted couple.
So she told me.
It is fortunate that she was here with you.
Well, that is a matter of opinion.
Madame?
My poor boy, how could you know that I have a reputation when it comes to husbands? Louise, are you sure you can move?
Yes. Now the carriage is here, I must return. My poor Henri. It's like some awful nightmare. I cannot believe this has happened. Philippe has been so kind. He's tried to pretend there is still some hope of recovery, but... Oh, Madame, in my heart of hearts...
Yes?
I know there isn't. Madame...
Yes?
You never finished your story.
That is not important now.
I should like to know what happened. I need to know.
What have I done? Oh, what have I done? Oh, brother, why did I promise you to kill her when I loved her so much?
Do not grieve, Prince. I am not dead. Forgive me for playing you a trick which saved you from committing a crime.
And saved your life. How could I reproach you, my far-sighted darling?
And so the prince and princess lived happily ever after, and everyone sang the praises of the discreet princess.
I'm glad it had a happy ending.
You approve?
Ildefonso did nothing, Babelada talked too much, Finetta deserved to survive.
Better to be energetic and discreet.
Just so, and not trust people too much.
There is that as well.
There are things I would like to tell you.
Best not.
You see, your fairy tale showed me...
Believe me, best not. Let us just say, perhaps in the end, I was your fairy godmother.
Madame, the coach is ready.
Goodbye, Madame.
Goodbye, my dear. My dear Eloise, how delightful to learn that at long last I may return. My friend Louise is several months a widow now, and wears her grief very becomingly. Philippe is a great consolation to her, and no one seems to have questioned Monsieur de Ventadour's unfortunate accident. I've written several news stories which I look forward to reading to you all. Indeed, I cannot tell you how much I long for the innocence of Paris.
In Tales the Countess Told by Stephen Wyatt, the Countess d'Aulnoy was played by Eleanor Bron, Louise by Janine Wood, and Prince Richcraft by Adam Godley. The Yellow Dwarf was played by Philip Joseph, the King of the Golden Mines by Kenny Blythe, Princess Ildefonsa by Sandy Walsh, Princess Finetta by Claire Corbett, and Princess Babelada by Richenda Carey. All other parts were played by the company, and the director was Claire Grove.
That's where our fairy tale ends. Next week, we've a feature-length drama written by Christopher Douglas, perhaps best known around here as the voice of the cantankerous Ed Reardon, and of the world's most disappointing cricketer, Dave